Welcome to Real Talk. Come follow me. We're excited to have you with us. Thanks for liking, subscribing, and clicking the bell so you get all the little ding dings.
It's very satisfying to click the bell.
It is?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad you threw that in there. We are on Alma 17 through 22. I will make an instrument of thee. I call this the AKA Lamanites receive a testimony of Christ.
Perfect.
And I don't really know how that's an AKA because it's not really shorter, but this is...
It's not at all.
It's not at all. It's not at all.
Awesome.
But I think it's important to note that this is when the mission of the sons of Mosiah are going into the kingdom of the Lamanites that is so intense. Like, as a missionary parent, like, oh, that's a great idea. Let's do that. Yeah. That's a great plan. Yeah. And so I think this is an interesting full circle moment where we're starting to see fulfillment of prayers answered in these conversion stories.
Yeah, and it makes me think of when I was a teenager.
Back in the day.
Those are some of my favorite stories. When I was a teenager, I used to really struggle with feeling like my parents were too strict. And I know I'm not the only one. Like, I think all teenagers do. Take it easy. My parents, we've had this conversation before and laughed about it. So mom and dad, they already know. But I always just felt like they were too strict. I'm like, I'm a good guy. Like, just trust me to do whatever I want. And they didn't. They actually would rein me in and give me boundaries. And so
they loved you with boundaries?
Crazy. Weird. So it's not that they were strict. It's just, it was my perception. And to be honest, I really struggled with it to the point where even in my patriarchal blessing, which I got my senior year, it actually has a phrase in there that says, you may have felt your parents were too strict. And I'm like, yeah, I'm like opening my eye like, that's right, you know? But
I love God. He is the greatest.
It was really funny. Now looking back, it was funny, but then I'm like, see, even God thinks you are, which isn't how it's phrased. But anyway, I really wrestled with this and I prayed about it. I'm like, Heavenly Father, what's going on here? And he didn't answer that prayer as a teenager. He is beginning to answer it now that I have teenagers. And I've thought a lot about this, this simple thing that really bugged me, that's really made a big difference though now. The answer to that prayer could only be received, and I could only really get it by being a parent, I think. Or at least that's the way God worked for me. So it took 20 years to answer that prayer.
And how many other prayers fill in the gap, right? Of any prayer that you've been praying a long time, that God in his mercy, we've said this before on Real Talk, wants context, wants us to be prepared to receive something. And so sometimes as a kid to our dad, we're saying, please give this to us now. And he's saying in wisdom, yeah, I will, but it's going to be timed perfectly.
Yeah, it'll be 20 years later, but you'll get it. And it's almost like he won't cheapen a good answer to a prayer by missing out on the timing. So sometimes we just need experience. And the reason I bring this up is Alma 17 is an answer to a 500-year-old prayer. This is Lehi and Nephi start praying. And then Enos and many others have prayed that the Lamanites will receive the gospel. And it takes 500 years. And when we really start getting this fulfilled. So my whole point in saying that is, if you're struggling with getting a prayer answered, I think maybe a deep breath might be useful by looking at this and saying, well, it took 500 years for them. It's taken a year for me. Maybe I can hold off and let God work his magic.
And I wonder if that's where Lehi was comforted. Even though he saw Laman and Lemuel's departures, he saw further into the future here in this time and was comforted in that. Yeah. I love that thought. I love that invitation. Alma 17 is a Scott Sorensen chapter because it's talking about these gifts of the Spirit. I think you've asked that question of our guests on Real Talk, and I love that idea of pondering on what gifts of the Spirit can we ask for to really be a solution for the issues or problems we're finding ourselves in. And we really see in Alma 17 where these missionaries are literally given the power to teach, the spirit of revelation, the strength to withstand and be patient, because they are going to totally need patience in afflictions as a spiritual gift, to be instruments in God's hand and to be comforted by the Spirit. Those are just some of the Alma 17 gifts of the Spirit. And I think what a great talking point or conversation to have with your Heavenly Father or with your family or your spouse about what are those gifts of the Spirit that maybe you're feeling like you need, and get specific. I know God really likes specifics. I can speak. God likes it when we come to him in boldness and say, hey, I'm fasting and praying. I've asked for a blessing. I need the gift of patience because I have a 13-year-old. I need the gift of revelation because I'm starting this new job and I'm not sure how to navigate this new role and it's really scary. I need the gift of power to testify because now I'm going on a mission. And it's not that you're always going to get exactly, but I think the Lord wants to create relationships with us, right?
That's funny. This is embarrassing to admit, but one time I've legitimately prayed for the gift to be better at cooking.
Why is that embarrassing?
Because I'm not naturally gifted at it. And so I'm like, I need the gift to be able to cook.
I do
when you
too.
have kids, it's
My
kind of an
family's
important
like,
one.
you should ask for that. I thought you were going to
He's
say
still
the
waiting
gift
to
of
answer that
golfing.
prayer.
That's what I thought.
No.
Okay.
Fun
fact.
So one of the things I love in here too that goes along with the gifts is desires. And so just really quick, in 17:9, we get a bunch of verses about their desires, that they might be an instrument in the hands of God. They desired that. The second one is in verse 16. They wanted to bring the Lamanites to a knowledge of the plan of redemption. That was a desire. Bring redemption. Verse 23, they wanted to dwell among this people, maybe even until the day they die. They didn't know this was going to be 14 years. They didn't know how long it would be. And then verse 25, they want to serve. So there's their desires. So their desires now feed their actions. And then when your desires and actions are aligned with God, that's when God can endow you with power, and that's what happens. So
and that's the addition to what I was just saying about asking for those gifts of the Spirit. When you're in line, right, God's only going to give you what's good for you, but if it's a desire of yours and it's in line with what God's will for you is, it's pretty powerful to see it manifest.
That's where you are in your most powerful space, is when what you've talked about and then what they talk about with desires kind of align. That's where you can maximize.
And that takes time sometimes to wrestle, because maybe God doesn't want you to be a great chef.
Yeah.
Sorry.
He might not, because I'm not very good still, but he's answering. But the reason why their desires are so important is because it shows in here. Like, can you imagine if you're FaceTiming your family as a missionary, and you're like, I have this investigator family, they're awesome. They're kind of struggling. Your parents are like, well, is it smoking? No. Are they struggling with keeping the Sabbath day holy? No. Well, what's going on? What are they struggling with? Their investigators, and I don't mean to make this funny, but their investigators were struggling with murder. Like, murder's not funny, but it's like, that's what they're struggling with. So like on the scale of mighty changes of heart, this is about as extreme as you can get.
A non-murderer.
They want to end the life of people, and now they're going to teach them to find new life through Christ. So it's kind of an amazing story.
Yeah.
And then let me just show you one real quick thing. So actions or desires lead to actions. Listen to Ammon's actions here and how they relate to Christ. So Ammon, here's just a few, you could find more. Ammon dwells with people who constantly misunderstand him. Ammon chooses to serve rather than lead. He chooses, he's a shepherd who finds lost sheep. He brings the best out of others. He's willing to lay down his life for his sheep. He has this kind of almost magical quality to take negatives and turn them into positives. He's a friend to the king, and he is obedient to all the commands of the king.
Who does that sound like?
I know, it's just like, he is so a type for Christ. You get Christ-like desires, Christ-like actions, Christ-like power.
So is this Ammon of legs or Ammon of arms?
Ammon of arms.
This is the Ammon of arms.
Remember about that.
A few episodes ago, we talked about the other Ammon. And
Ammon of legs in Mosiah 7,
yes.
8, 9, somewhere
Your 10-year-old boys will be so happy if you throw that in your Come Follow Me discussion.
Ammon of arms.
This is the Ammon of arms we're discussing. I love that. Are you ready to talk about...
I know you are. Let's do it.
You are too.
Oh, I can't wait.
I know. Yeah. This is like Disneyland for Scott and I, because today we're discussing with you two of our most favorite people in the scriptures.
Absolutely.
Abish. Underrated,
I think.
Which is why we get excited, because we like to shine a spotlight, right?
Absolutely.
Abish. I cannot wait to have a conversation with her face to face and have a better understanding of what verse 16 of Alma 19 says, that she had a remarkable vision of her father. And I'm going to just throw out a little string that you can pull. This is not to get caught up into what is this, is there scriptural proof of this? But it would be helpful, and it has helped me to consider in expanding this story, because we have kind of a limited understanding of her childhood and what this really meant. Was this a remarkable vision of her father because her father's passed? Was this a remarkable vision of her father because her father had a vision and he shared it with her, which I think most of us probably were taught that way in Sunday school or in seminary? Yep. Or, and this is the string I'd like you to pluck, is this a remarkable vision of her father with a capital F, as in a Sacred Grove experience? Had she had such a profound first vision experience in her life that her testimony was so anchored that she was preserved and set in the wings for this moment where she comes
foreordained.
Foreordained last week, yeah. Was she foreordained, and that God knew her pivotal role in this amazing story, that she would have to have this burning of a conversion that was so bright to go against what was a potential riot situation. Mm-hmm. And I think of the young women today, the Abishes that I meet, and I said Detroit, Michigan as a shout out for you.
That's where I serve my mission.
Yeah.
That's why.
That these young women that go to school every day and they're the only members of the church. Mm-hmm. I know young women that live in the Middle East, and they are the Abishes that carry these visions of their fathers in their hearts. And they're held in reserve for the moment in which they can declare, and sometimes they can't use words, but they show up in their light when there's dark swirling around. And they are pivotal for the story that's happening.
I've never thought Abish specifically with young women. That is such a great example of someone in the scriptures where you can really look to as a great example. I think we should pull every string about Abish and go out there, because we don't know definitively what. Right. So go to places where the Spirit can testify, because maybe the Spirit can testify of you of that quality of Abish I have and I can do. Because a lot of people didn't actually listen to her. She had to go in and physically raise the queen. And, she had to actually go in there. And that's important.
And it even says she cried out. And I love the idea that her feminine quality, because I tend to like to cry at times, that those feminine qualities were literally instruments in the Lord's hands, because she could cry out. As a woman, she was able to be a disciple and an ambassador uniquely because she was a woman. And I think, especially for the young women in our lives, that if we can hyper-focus a little bit on some of these small examples of women in the scriptures, because like per ratio, right?
It's not even close.
It's not even close.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to invite the Abishes around you, or acknowledge in your daughter's lives, I see this quality in you. I see you walk into a room and you share that light. I see you carry your testimony, and when the time is right, you share it. I love that about you. And what would change if the young women of today that are on the planet really saw themselves as Abishes?
Well, and that's the Queen Esther as well, prepared for such a time as this. And it also makes me think of President Nelson emphasizing, hear him. Yeah. She was someone who heard her loving God testify of something that really burned within her. And so she had learned already, so she was prepared that fire was lit at the right time.
And this isn't just the only female we're going to talk about. So who is it that you want to...
Queen Lamoni. I love this. So I wrote a lot about this in the book, and the caption I wrote
Tell the book.
In the book that I have down here, come follow me through the Book of Mormon. So when I talked about this in there, this is the caption I had, and when I typed it out, I paused, and I just wept. And the caption I put in, the divine role of women in the Lamanite conversion story. This turns out different. If it's just Ammon, Aaron, Omner, Himni, and the small group that went with them, this is not the same experience. You need Abish and you need Queen Lamoni. So when you go through this, watch them, notice them, pull out the divine feminine characteristics in them. You will see a loving mother in heaven through these women. Queen Lamoni she's a queen. Like, she is, anyway. So let me just share with you a couple of things I've found that you might want to think about. In Alma 19, verses 12 through 13. So King Lamoni, we know he's taught by Ammon, and he passes out. He pierces the veil, which is interesting. And so he has this experience, and it's for 3 days, and Queen Lamoni fights for him, right? Don't we have heavenly parents who will fight for us? So she fights for him. She will not let them bury him, no matter what. And so anyway, when he comes out of this experience he's having, listen to what he says. And I think he's looking at his wife. And I think this says a lot more than maybe what the words say. He says, "Blessed be the name of God, and blessed art thou, Queen Lamoni, the love of my life. For as sure as thou livest, behold, I have seen my Redeemer. He shall come forth and be born of a woman." I think that's a tribute to her. "And he shall redeem all mankind who believe on his name." I think there is a divine feminine that he saw when he saw Mary. When he sees Mary, however he beholds her and her characteristics, I think he's looking at her and saying, wait a second. I know this kind of woman. I am married to this kind of woman. I think Queen Lamoni is a Mary-like woman in scriptures, because why would he say, "Blessed art thou," and that Christ will be born of a woman? Why say those two things to his wife, if not to be a spiritual divine tribute to her divine femininity? And an interesting aspect of this is, we know King Lamoni and Queen Lamoni have daughters. We don't know if they have sons, but we know they have daughters.
Right.
And so it makes me think a little bit of President Nelson, understanding through his life experience, as much as he can, the divine role of women and what he's been teaching about women the last few years to elevate and help clarify our role, or your role, in the gathering of Israel in our day right now.
And the partnership, right? Mm-hmm. Because like you said, it would be a very different story without these two pivotal women. And I think if you don't hear anything or take anything from this episode other than focusing on a conversation about the beautiful queens in your life, or the Abishes, I think it would be a gift and a blessing for your week, if that's what you focus on. Yeah,
I actually think there is good a mission. We always say, we got to be a missionary like Ammon. We could be missionaries like Queen Lamoni and Abish and be just as, if not more, effective.
I love that.
Yeah.
Alma 21 through 22, this is the end of this, like, preaching to the Lamanites and struggling with these patterns of preaching to people and struggling on missions, and seeing some areas, I think, of your missions that are successful and not. And if you're not a full-time missionary, that you could apply that to parenting. You could apply that to your career.
Your ward.
To your ward, right.
Sometimes it just doesn't work as well as you would like. And we come away a little disappointed.
And I love that Alma 22 gives us a pattern of praying, because I think I can get a little lackadaisical in my prayers. And if we really understand what mighty prayer, crying under the Lord, this pattern of prayer is specific and helpful. And it's kind of elevated me when I think about when they see people fall to their knees and hold up their hands, and pondering on the way we're praying, and maybe what can you do as a family or as an individual to pray differently. And I love the idea of what are we willing to give away that in Alma 22 is discussed. I think of Elder Bednar and how he talks about personal commandments, which kind of scares me, because you're not quite sure what the Lord's like. And for your personal progression, you're going to need to give up, I don't know, Twitter, golfing.
Xbox, golfing. Stop it. Too soon.
Too soon. We're only in June.
That's right.
I can't go to the golfing. So I think, what is it that we could give away? What conversation could you have in your Come Follow Me discussions and study this week about maybe what God is asking for us to give away? Because we see these missionaries asking a big ask in that area.
Yeah, so look at King Lamoni's prayer, which is a shorter one, and then King Lamoni's father's prayer in Alma 22, which is a longer one, where he says, I will give up everything to know you.
Yeah. And
so those prayers are really important. Let me just point out one quick thing. The temple in the Book of Mormon. If you go through, so it's Alma 18:36 through 39. That's Ammon teaching King Lamoni. And then if you go to Alma 22:12 through 14, that is Aaron teaching King Lamoni's dad. Okay? So those are the references. But you'll notice the same pattern. They teach creation. They teach fall. They teach being created in the image of God. Divine messengers, redemption. It leads them to mighty prayer. Are you following me? Mighty prayer, and then they are able to pierce the veil and have experiences that change their lives and the lives of their community forever. These are temple doctrines that are unmistakable in the way Ammon and the sons of Mosiah teach the Lamanites. They follow the temple pattern in helping them have a mighty change of heart.
And at the time of this taping, our temples are still closed for certain ordinances. And I think anytime that we can see the temple pattern, that really invites us to be, as Elder Bednar says, like have the temple in us.
Yeah.
And so instead of saying there's no evidence of the temple in the Book of Mormon, I love that you highlighted that. So thank you for that.
Well, let's go into our invitation and wrap up. So this week, it's what can you do this week to express gratitude to an Abish or Queen Lamoni in your life?
And it's not Mother's Day week.
It's not, but let's do it. Who are the Queen Lamonis and Abishes, those women, those divine women in your life that have made all the difference? And how can you express gratitude in a meaningful way? Please post those. We would love to see what you're doing. I would love some ideas. I don't tend to be very creative here, so I might
or share this episode with that Abish in your life or that Queen Lamoni in your life to say thank you for being this in my life. Maybe you don't even know, but I was listening to Real Talk this week, and it was obvious to me that I needed you to know that you are that for me.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for watching another episode with us. We love you guys. Thank you for being a part of our community.